Welcome to ThinkTech Radio's Focus on Asia Tuesday. Today's segment is Asia in Review with your host, international business lawyer David Day.
Well, good afternoon, and we are live broadcasting from the belly of the beast here on Bishop Street. I am David Day, and my co-host for this show is none other than the CEO, chairman of the board, and field marshal for ThinkTech Hawaii, Jay Fidell. Jay, why don't you say hi to everybody here?
Okay, first I want to say it's not Tuesday, it's Friday. I want to be clear about that. The second thing I want to say is Anyang Hashinika, okay? That's for you to consider, and after a while you'll probably tell people what it means, but I'll tell you in advance what it means as far as I know. It means hello, David.
Hello, Jay. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I know those of you that are out there, you're facing those long lines of red taillights heading on your way home on Friday evening here. And we have a very, very special program for you here. We're going to be talking about or having a conversation with a living treasure here in Hawaii, a citizen diplomat, Patrick Border. And we're going to be talking about Eyewitness North Korea. Pat is an eyewitness who has been in North Korea several times, and we're going to be talking about the view from the other side of the DMZ. And I know that many of you listening to this program, you think you know all about North Korea, the intel black hole, a place where we always talk about regime change, food for nukes program that's gone sideways, drought, famines, floodings, a human rights nightmare, missile, nuclear tests of some kind and some kind of capability. But what we want to talk about this show is something totally different. We want to talk about the humanity that exists there, and we are so, Jay and I are both so excited to have Pat Border with us because this is someone who has been on the ground and can really talk about the humanity that exists in North Korea.
Why don't you let him say hello?
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
That's Pat Border. I didn't do that. I'm so nervous here, you know.
Try to be calm.
Yeah. You know, we are so happy that you take this time, Pat. And how about tell the folks? Let's start out with kind of what's new.
What you've been doing,
yeah,
Pat?
What you've been doing, Pat?
Well, I managed to go to a film festival in Pyongyang a couple of weeks ago, and it was a very professionally put on event, which surprised me a whole lot. They function largely the same way as film festivals in the free world do. They had jurors from Germany and South America and Australia, and they had films from all over. My favorite of the whole time I was there was an Iranian film that I'm looking into getting now, and I hope that what we saw in Pyongyang in North Korea will make it to the local film festival here because it's really very good cinema.
How many times have you been to North Korea?
That was the third trip, and each one was for a different purpose. The first one I call my Neil Armstrong trip because I had dreamed of going to North Korea for a long time, but it seemed not possible. So the first time I got there and stepped off the plane, in the back of my mind I said, this is one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. So that was a thrill. The second trip, I wanted to see more of the historical places, those that became significant during the Korean War, and I saw the East Coast, which has the good beaches and a lot of the history of the U.S. evacuation from the war. But this time, I didn't travel around too much. I went down to the DMZ as I've done before, but other than that, it was primarily focused on the film festival and seeing a good show, and I did. I was kind of amazed at how professional the show was that they put on.
What's it like traveling in North Korea? I mean, people travel. They go to other countries. They go as tourists. This sounds a little more adventurous than that. What's it like?
If you go to most of the larger cities, the travel is not so different than it would be if you were traveling as part of a tour in any country, countries in Europe or such.
You get on a tour in Beijing, is that what you did?
What happens is the place of deployment is Beijing because that's where the North Korean flights fly in. They don't have much air traffic.
Pat, let's make something clear for our audience here. You did this as a citizen diplomat, as a private citizen, no government connection, no official invitation, anything like that?
The short explanation is this. When I was in my 20s, I was stationed in South Korea. It was a remote tour. When I went into the tour, I felt like it was a deprivation. And when I left, I realized it was an inspiration. I've been back to South Korea since. But as a service person, I always wondered, what is it that I'm protecting people from?
Okay.
And there was such little information about that. So I had this burning desire to see, how does the other side live, and why are they a threat to me? And I had to have that answered.
But you took quite some time before you actually got back there, yeah?
It's true, Jay, because for such a long time, I really believed there was no way to get in. And then what happened is the British really warmed up to the Koreans, and actually in the year 2000, they exchanged embassies, so that the British embassy now in Pyongyang is the official sign of recognition, diplomatic recognition. As soon as that happened, the British were really able to have the run of the country, and they've had a warm relationship with the North Koreans ever since.
Pat, there's probably several people out there in the audience listening to this, and they're thinking to themselves, well, boy, this sounds interesting. How could I do this, or could I do this?
The answer is absolutely yes. If you look at the State Department advisories concerning North Korea, the primary concern is with the state of health care. So there are procedures for evacuation in case you had a medical emergency. The Swedish embassy covers American interests in North Korea right now, and for maybe $50 you can buy insurance that would provide you with $1 million worth of evacuation to Tokyo, Beijing, Seoul, any of the large cities around there that could give you the proper medical care. But except for that, it's a peaceful country. There's no indication of any unrest, and certainly what surprised me the most, there's nothing the least bit unfriendly toward Americans. In fact, Americans are forbidden fruit. That's who they want to talk to, because the government indoctrinates them so much that when they find out there's a miguk, which is the Korean word for American, in their presence, that's the person they want to talk to. And it's been a lot of fun, just the person-to-person contact.
Can you reach out and talk to anybody on the street? Are there people who are watching you, taking notes on you, or you have run of the house?
You do. They have a limited amount of control because they're concerned with people wandering around and getting lost. But I've never been followed, and the way that it's handled is this: the tour guides are Koreans. They're members of the party, but
But you have to have one?
Well, yes, you do. You do. And I need one. I could easily get lost, and I don't want to be lost. But the tour guides are paid a minimal salary, probably $10 or $15 a month by the government. So they survive on the tips that Americans and all foreigners give them at the conclusion of the tour. And I like to tip them.
I still want to know how does someone get on a tour? What do they do? What do they do?
What you do, the way I've gotten on, there are American tours now, but I've always gone through the British tour people because they're the ones who have the best access to every corner of the country. So I go to koryotours.com, and
how do you spell that?
KORYO tours, or koryogroup.com. When you get there, the British group explains to you how you go about getting a visa. You need a photograph. You need a passport with multiple entry to China, and then you simply wire the requisite number of euros to a Hong Kong branch of a bank that they maintain, and you're signed up. As long as you have a passport, you have no problem getting in at all.
It's fascinating, really fascinating.
I expect that when people find out, they're going to go. I mean, this is it's exciting.
It's,
for
yeah,
one
it's,
thing.
it's an opening of a whole new frontier.
Just for comparison, it was, 3 years ago that Lisa Ling, who worked for something called Current.com Vanguard,
Right.
a video company, a news company. She was a reporter, essentially. They were caught on the Yallow River and halfway across, and two of them wound up in jail for a year.
Sure.
And that's the same country.
It's the same country. The only country in the world that rewards you for sneaking past the border is the United States. Every other country objects to your doing that, and they snuck across the Yalu River, which is not the way to do it. What you do is you get a visa and then fly in from Beijing.
You do it the right way.
On Air Koryo, which is they have modern Tupolev jets, and it's a pleasant ride of about an hour and a half. So from Honolulu, actually what I have to do is I usually take Korean Airlines, stop in Seoul, go on to Beijing, stay a couple days in Beijing to acclimatize myself to the time zones, and then take Air Koryo from the same airport over to Pyongyang.
Okay, we've got the audience now. They know that they can do it. Let's take up the kind of the broad topic of humanity and talking about people, what it's really like, and we'll do that after the break.
You're listening to Asia in Review Thursday on the ThinkTech radio series here on AM 760 KGU. Now here once again is your host, David Day.
We're back. We're live. We're talking about Eyewitness North Korea, view from the other side of the DMZ. My co-host is Jay Fidell, and with us in the studio is the citizen diplomat living treasure from the state of Hawaii, Mr. Patrick Border. And if you didn't catch the first session, Pat was telling us about 3 trips to North Korea he has made. And Pat, let's get into the humanity, meeting the people in various trips here. And you have some kind of real humorous incident that you can tell you about that kind of shows the humanity of the North Koreans?
I do, and I've concluded after all this that that's the real reason I go. I don't want to see museums. I've been to the mausoleum enough times to know that Kim Il-sung is still dead and that he's going to stay that way. But what I really cherish is this. They have a lot of very classy amusement parks there. In fact, we went to the newest one that was just completed. And these amusement parks are like the biggest places, the Knott's Berry Farm and the Disneyland in the United States. And we went to the newest one. And I don't usually ride on these rides, but this one time I decided, okay, I'm going to take one of these huge Italian-made rides, which is one of these counterweighted centrifugal force devices that every kid would recognize the first time you saw it. And it rocks up so that the cab, where everybody's located, goes up to the very top, and then maybe it goes over the top and around, or maybe it goes backwards. There's a lot of G-forces working. It's disorienting, so it's scary, so everyone loves it. So I got on this ride, and there's 50 North Korean soldiers watching me. And these soldiers, this is their million-man army. Okay. These are high school kids, and they're delightful. When you see these kids, it almost triggers your parental instincts. You think of your daughter, and you want to go up and shake hands and ask them how it's going.
Why are they watching you?
So because I'm a miguk, and they want to watch me come apart at the seams, and they want to see if I've got a sense of humor.
But you didn't tell them you've been trained at the Punahou Carnival, so you can hold it together.
Let me tell you what happened here, because you guys will love it. So I'm hamming it up like I'm scared to death and I'm about to die, and they're laughing, they're yucking it up just tremendously, and we're making a human connection. And then I get on the ride, and of course when you get onto it, you eventually get accustomed to it. But so we go through the ride, and we go sometimes over the top, and I'm giving everybody these looks of utter terror, which is just making side-splitting humor for these kids. So we get to the end of it, and we finally rock to the end, and I say to myself, I'd like to make a contact with these folks and shake a few hands, so I want to do the one last thing to give them one good riotous laugh. So I get off of this ride, and I take 2 normal steps, and then I come apart at the seams. I'm shaking and falling over and all the rest, and these kids are just roaring, and that's the perfect entree to going up and shaking a few hands, and that's what I like about it.
Well, did
the
you do
most.
that with them?
I did it with these kids, and these are the enemy forces with the pea green uniforms and the bus driver hats, or the gendarme caps that the North Koreans wear.
Right.
The people that we've all been conditioned to be so afraid of, and it was not like that at all. The humanity of it. One time when we were walking down from the Kim Il Sung Square, just to a couple of blocks to get to the bus, we hear all this roar and clapping, and we look inside the building, and it's Miller time in this tavern, and all the workers are looking out and clapping and waving to us. This is the reality of it. You got to remember, and I'm reminding myself, in a communist setting, the people have no say anyway. So when you hear these inflammatory remarks at the UN and all these other statements from the people who run the government, it's not the people. The people are very different, and the most compelling aspect of all these trips is communicating with the people and being the citizen diplomat and making friends.
You didn't find that they had hostility toward you, or that they saw you as the enemy? You didn't find that they were a little nervous because they were worried, for example, that the government might be watching them?
What you see when you look in the faces of people is a sort of tentativeness. They're waiting for you to say hello so they can say hello back and start a conversation.
They want you to make the first move.
Well, look, these people have been conditioned to believe that I'm Satan's child, and that my main goal is to kill as many babies as possible prior to the time that I leave the country. So when I exceed expectations, even by a marginal amount, that's a major,
You're a hero.
That's a major diplomatic coup for the United States of America. So the most fun time, because look, Americans are forbidden fruit. They've told them to stay away from us, that we're vile, filthy characters, and so exceeding expectations is easy enough. Whenever I was walking through a building this time, and it was one of these parts that I really didn't need to see, where we're looking at artwork and all, and I walked out, and I was standing next to a couple of middle-class looking Korean men, and one of them said "Miguk," and so I thought, I'm confident enough now to be able to talk to people, so I said, "Oh, I'm a Miguk."
Did you speak in Korean then when you talk?
I speak an occasional phrase here and there.
Okay.
Koreans would say chokum, which means just a very, very little bit. But I know enough to get myself into trouble and get myself out of trouble.
Okay.
So with this guy, I said, "Oh, I'm a Miguk," and he turned around and he spoke English, and we talked about it was probably a conversation that lasted for a minute, but it was refreshing, because he talked about, if you guys would just get your troops out, we could reunify. But he said that with a laugh, and he said, "Oh, do you remember Park Chung-hee, who was the dictator president who was from the 50s into the late 70s until he was assassinated?" And I said, "Yes, I was stationed in Korea during that period." And it was a refreshing conversation, but it was lighthearted. And the idea was, he sort of chided me, but very gently, about, isn't it time for the Americans to leave? And I said, well, under the right circumstances, yes. And we left it at that.
So people do speak English, though.
They do.
Where do they get that?
English is now the second language. They used to learn Chinese, but that's not the language of business. And so they're teaching them English, and people are learning it very fast.
And they're getting ready with the international business infrastructure of learning English.
Well, and you have to remember, a lot of countries, Britain is one, but you've got other European countries. Sweden is another, and I'm not sure about Italy and Germany, but others of the countries of Western Europe recognize them. We are behind in our contact with Korea, and I think that's something that is very important. I appreciate those people who plan the war games and who look for the worst case scenario. You have to keep your guard up against people. To this day, despite the fact that we're friends with the Chinese, our whole policy is the same containment policy that we had in the Cold War, encircle the enemy to give them pause before they do anything rash. That's our whole foreign policy, and it worked with Russia. It's the containment policy that came out of the post-World War II times. George Kennan was the author of it, one of the assistant secretaries of state, and it's a good policy. But by the same token, we should have other initiatives as well, so that if we can't make the connection politically, we can't do political diplomacy because there are issues between us. We can't do economic diplomacy because they don't have anything to offer in the economic area. So where do you go to? You go to the civic diplomacy.
Cultural stuff.
It's the cultural stuff, and this is how we made it into China. It was ping pong diplomacy.
Yeah.
That meant that we looked for common ground. We found it in sports, and it was after we established ping pong diplomacy that Richard Nixon went to China, and the whole world changed since then.
Real
So
quick.
what about business? Maybe it's the next block of time, but did you see Americans doing business? I guess you saw these countries that have recognized North Korea doing business. Did you see an American
At
business?
a rudimentary level, yes. An Egyptian company is handling the telecom, installing the phones, wireless and landlines for
So
the
they
whole
have cell
country.
phones and
Oh, they have cell phones.
Okay.
Cell phones are very common, and their reception is the equal of anything we have in the U.S. In fact, they have cell phones that work both in China and in North Korea, so that our tour guides are able to seamlessly use their phone. As soon as they get off the airplane in North Korea, they go right to calling, and they can call between the two countries with ease.
And
So-
could you call back to Moeda Ely?
I could call. There is in the hotel a telephone service, but we don't have contact with North Korea, so it's $5 a minute to call Moeda Ely. So, in
a
other words,
record.
in case of extreme emergency, could I call from the hotel? Yes. I've never done it. I'd never contemplate doing it. And anybody I want to talk to here, I'll only be gone for 10 days to 2 weeks. I can talk to them when I get back.
you went to the DMZ from the North Korean side. What
I
was that
did.
like?
I've been to the DMZ on both sides now, 4 times from the south, 3 times from the north, and every time I hear one of our politicians say, "Oh my God, this is the scariest place on earth," I laugh out loud.
Why
Because-
is that? Why is that?
Well, the reason it is because on the southern side, they're very bureaucratic, and I have to laugh at the soldiers, the Mad Mary monks of the DMZ, they call themselves, because they're pretenders. These are people who are self-important a little bit, and on the northern side, they're much more jovial. So I've seen it from both sides, and you know, when the politicians go up there and say, "My God, this is a scary place," I mean, are there budgetary considerations at issue here where the defense budget, you know, we have 28,000 troops in South Korea and another 50,000 in Japan. Are we guarding against North Korea or are we guarding against China? I think my personal belief is that our strategy is to, at the surface, guard against a supposed threat from North Korea, but I think we've advanced to the point where we're really looking more at China.
You know, in the 3 trips, you have changed. You've had a personal dynamic about it, leading to where you are now. And maybe after the break, you can tell us more about how your own perception of things has changed from trip number 1 now to trip number 3.
I think that's great. Stay with us. We'll be back.
You're
smiled
listening
a
to
lot.
Asia in Review Thursday on the ThinkTech radio series here on AM 760 KGU. Now here once again is your host, David Day.
We're back. We're doing a special show. Yes, I know it's Friday. It's not Thursday, but that's okay. We've got as my co-host Jay Fidell and our guest, citizen diplomat Patrick Porter. And we've been talking about his eyewitness trips into North Korea. And right before the break, Jay, you want to repose your question again?
Yeah, Pat, you know, you've this is, you know, if you make 3 trips here, and from the tone and tenor of your remarks, not only today, but in other times when we've talked to you. Clearly, this is an important part of your life, your worldview.
Tremendous passion here.
Yeah, and yeah, it's quite extraordinary, I think. It defines you right now. Can I say that? I think I can say that.
What the closest I can come to agreeing with that is to say that my trips to Korea are less than a career and more than a hobby.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So here's the question. You've made 3 trips, all those on the heels of, your military service back in what was the
70s.
The 70s, and so there has to be a dynamic. And you said you do different things on these trips, and finally you've come to the this arts and culture way of looking at it with the film festival, so forth. But tell us how you have changed in your perception of Korea in those 3 trips.
I always wondered during that period before I could go in, what was the common thread between these people? If I liked the South Koreans, would I like the North Koreans? If I could connect with them, would it be for different reasons or the same reasons? And I came away with the conclusion that the reason I like South Koreans is the same reason I like North Koreans, because they're very much the same people. They're very realistic. I think there is a popular belief that Koreans are automatons who mindlessly follow the government with enthusiasm, and that's not true at all. For all of the tour guides that I've had, they know to a person that Southerners have a better life than they do, and they are very realistic, and of course they don't speak disrespectfully of the government, but they are delightful people. When I go in, I like them when I meet them, and I miss them when I leave them. And I have learned over the time, I'll tell you something funny. The first time I went in, I took cigarettes and, mini bar, Chivas Regals and stuff like that.
Little bottles, yeah.
Yeah, those little bottles, that sort of thing. And that was kind of okay. But now that I know that these people get almost a salary of almost nothing and that my tip makes a difference in their whole lives, I do 2 things, and I do it on purpose. Freedom is a virus, and it undermines totalitarian regimes, and I want to do my part. I'm a born-again capitalist.
Okay,
And,
all right.
Yeah, and so here's what I do. This is what I did in this trip. In earlier trips, I wasn't sure whether, taking them designer clothing would be viewed favorably, or whether they would feel that, maybe we're looking down on them. They definitely don't. Every one of the tour guides dressed their absolute best, but there's a certain threadbare aspect about all the people. You could look at them and say, these people are really taking care, but I could help them. And so
So what do you do? Yeah.
What I instituted, I'll tell you what I do. For the women, when I get to China and I go to the Silk Street malls, I buy good silk scarves and the like. For the men, I go out to Brooks Brothers and buy dress shirts.
That's not in the mall in Beijing, is it?
No, that's out in Kapolei. and see, here's the way I look at this is what I call the Brooks Brothers Rebellion.
Okay. Let's hear about the Brooks Brothers.
Because the way I look at it is this: I want to undermine the regime and put some really good dressed people, best dressed people out on the streets. So I've started. I get you have to go with average sizes because you don't know what the neck size is and what the sleeve length. On average, they're slightly smaller. But sometimes you get a guy who's, just really big, football player size, even in North Korea. And so I buy, on average, probably size 16 neck. And I go in and I when I'm going through the duty free at the last stop there in Beijing, nothing helps things lubricate relations better than a good old bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label.
Okay, right.
And so for $20 or so, I pick up one of those, and I lavish these people with the best I can give. They get $10-15 a month. I mean, if I give them $50 to $100 a piece, I just made their whole year.
Yeah.
And see if they have hard currency, they can go into the department stores just like the big shots. So in Korea, in North Korea, you spend every currency but Korean money. I don't even see Korean money the whole time I'm there. They love euros, they love dollars, and they'll tolerate Chinese yuan. So if you give them a tip in that money, you just gave them entree to the department stores because they've got hard currency. And I love that.
I love this story.
Yeah, I do.
You know Joseph Nye Jr. from the Kennedy School of
Right. Kennedy School of Government. Yeah.
Government.
The soft power.
Soft power. So
Right.
this is the ultimate soft power.
It is. It
we
is.
call it Brooks Brothers diplomacy.
Brooks Brothers.
It's the Brooks Brothers Rebellion. It's just like, they'll look back when we have a free North Korea, they'll look back and say, how did it all get started? And
Well, I want
That border was there.
some political scientists will say, I think it got started with the Brooks Brothers Rebellion of 2012.
That's right.
Somehow that was the point. That was the tipping point.
And the roots of the Brooks Brother Rebellion all come from some store in Kapolei
it's some strip mall in Hawaii. Who knows exactly where it is, but that's how life works. The smallest things.
We wanted to cover this before the end of the show, and let me refresh on this. So we talked about, before the show began, we talked about lunatocracy. We talked about reconciling, what you see on these trips with what we hear from the media about and the government about what North Korea is doing. And we talked about how this is actually very fragile and that North Korea is kind of at a tipping point. And so what are your thoughts about that relative to a process happening and sort of a common denominator process happening in North Korea, but also elsewhere in the world?
I believe very strongly that Korea is near the point of change because it's analogous to other countries.
North Korea is.
North Korea is, and you stole my thunder there with the term lunatocracy
Go
because
ahead.
it really is.
Well, what is
You
a
have to
lunatocracy?
define it, yeah.
A lunatocracy is a system of merit whereby you have to be a little crazy to be able to run the country. If you're eccentric, that's okay. If you're pathologic, if you're a little bit psychotic, that's even better. One of our ambassadors to
It's
Japan.
not limited to North Korea.
Yeah, it really is.
Well,
we may have a lot of that in our own country here.
Give me some space here, fellas, because I think it's unique to North Korea. One of the Japanese ambassadors in the recent past, or the U.S. ambassadors to Japan, described the Korean leadership as about 150 members of a crime family. So it's really Michael Corleone and the Sopranos and a few other roughnecks, sort of
Who run the country.
mixed in with them, and they run the country. So it's a small group. It's a very narrow group of the privileged who can do whatever they want and live a Western lifestyle and come and go as they please into the country and out of it.
And what's the significance of that?
The significance of it is this. When you get to a tipping point, we have a history throughout the world that when you get to a tipping point where the citizenry and the army won't take it anymore, then the regime is over. You're seeing it to a degree in Egypt and in Libya, and very, very slowly in Syria, where they've got a civil war. But there's a clear pattern for it. You saw it in South Korea when you had 1 million people out on the street in Seoul, and all of a sudden the military dictatorship, the No Tae-woo, the president at the time of the Olympics, suddenly said, I think I'll retire. And the reason he did is because people said, yeah, pal, you'll retire. And we're doing it now. And that's what happened when Corazon Aquino came into power.
The People's Power Revolution.
The People Power Revolution. The people make all the difference in the world. You saw it in Romania, where Nicolae Ceausescu was shot and taken out, and he and his wife had their eyes gouged out. And it's happening in other places as well. Look at what happened in the Soviet Union in such a short time. 1981, Leonid Brezhnev dies. He's replaced by Yuri Andropov, the KGB chief, and he stays around for about 1.5 years, and then he drops off, and then he's dead, and he's replaced by Konstantin Chernyenko, who was literally Leonid Brezhnev's appointment secretary. Now they're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel in Russia. And who comes along after Chernyenko dies in turn? This obscure politician, a 55-year-old fella named Mikhail Gorbachev. And Gorbachev, everybody loved him. Margaret Thatcher said, we can do business with this guy. Ronald Reagan negotiated sweeping treaties that almost came into effect. But 4 years after Mikhail Gorbachev came to power, the Berlin Wall came down. And why? Because Gorbachev said, we don't have the ability to impose our will on the Warsaw Pact any longer. So Poland is gone. East Germany is gone. The Balkan states are gone. And by 1992, Mikhail Gorbachev handed over the keys to the Kremlin to Boris Yeltsin, and he was gone. I would suggest to you that something comparable to that is happening now. Kim Il-sung is now long dead. He had a history. It was a fake history, but he had a history where he personally kicked out the Japanese from the Korean Peninsula without any help from the U.S. Army. None of those Navy battles made any difference. Kim Il-sung personally...
I did it myself.
He personally kicked out the Japanese. His ne'er-do-well son, who died of liver failure from drinking too much cognac, came along, and they sort of had a lore about him. He was born on Mount Pektu, or so the story goes, but he wasn't really. He was born in Siberia, where his father was in hiding. And now these people are gone. Now they're to the bottom of the barrel. They've got this young kid, Kim Jong-un, a great breath of fresh air. He probably speaks better French than he does Korean, and that's the truth, because he spent his whole life living in Switzerland. And now he's going to be in charge of perestroika and glasnost. How long do you think that's going to last? You know, with his Western sensitivities, which are already showing up. You know, at the last major showing at one of the amusement parks, at the amusement park, Disney characters came out, and the funny part about it was you still have Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, and Donald Duck. And none of this was licensed. So the Disney people are furious because they're introducing all these Disney characters without paying the royalties.
Hey, now, are you saying that Mickey Mouse is the vanguard of the revolution?
Well, I'm helping him.
Okay.
He's not doing it single-handedly. He's got help from me.
We got to take time for a break here. We got some more exciting things to talk to Patrick Border, citizen diplomat with North Korea. Maybe changes in the winds. Maybe it is.
Hold that thought.
Hold that thought. We'll see you after the break.
You're listening to Asia in Review Thursday on the ThinkTech radio series here on AM 760 KGU. Now here once again is your host, David Day.
We're back, we're live, and we have a extraordinary program underway. If you've been listening to us, we are talking with citizen diplomat Patrick Border about his various trips and observations inside of North Korea. The conversation is entitled Eyewitness North Korea, View from the Other Side of the DMZ. And right before the break, Pat, you were talking about the changes that we've seen around the world in tipping points and the rise of people power, and I guess the potential that we could see that change coming in North Korea.
Yeah, can you tell us how it's working and how it will work as far as you can see?
I think the first observation I would make is that I'm talking about cultural diplomacy and what any citizen can do. All I need is a passport, a hotel reservation, and enough euros and dollars to get myself in, and I can cause some change because I exceed expectations, and that's all it takes to improve people's perception of the United States. What I see right now is a government that has no particular idea of what really goes on inside the country, and I think...
Wait, you're talking about the U.S. government?
I'm talking about the U.S. government. I believe there's a popular mythology about what goes on in North Korea and that it's pursued. Now, I'm realistic to know that our CIA has information that I'll never have access to, and it may be good information from their angle. But there's another angle, too.
What's that?
When we have the whole government of the United States and not so much as one person, even at a low level, who's ever really gone in and taken a look from an ordinary standpoint, not as a spy, not some CIA operative, but somebody who goes in and looks to the potential of establishing ping-pong diplomacy. You've got to remember, when Richard Nixon went to China, he didn't even tell the State Department about it because he knew they'd sabotage the deal. He and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger, who was not yet Secretary of State. William Rogers was the Secretary of State.
Right.
And so Nixon got Kissinger over to Pakistan, where President Yahya Khan from Pakistan did all the arrangements for them. It was all done under the table. It was done without any assistance from the State Department at all. The State Department is this
Are you saying the State Department is the problem?
Let me try to explain it for you. The State Department has often gotten wrong their assessments of everything. The first thing the State Department did when China went communist was to fire all the China experts and demonize them because supposedly John Service, John Davies, Edmund Clubb, and John Fairbank lost China for us. Those people were experts. They spoke Chinese. They lived most of their lives in China, and they were victimized. Those are the people who were thrown out of the State Department, and for a generation, we didn't have those kind of people anymore, which is sad, and that's when we went through that dark period where we called mainland China Red China, and we lived in the myth that the Taipei government was the real China. And and what Nixon and Kissinger privately worked out the entire arrangements. They bypassed the State Department, which they knew was not a part of the solution. It was a part of the problem. And a week before, when Nixon and Kissinger had their bags packed, they announced casually from the White House that the president was going to go to China, and the State Department went apoplectic on them. And what ended up happening is William Rogers, the Secretary of State, was taken along for the ride, and he shook a few hands, met and greeted people, and that was pretty much the extent of his involvement. And after a short hiatus, then Rogers quietly resigned in agony, and that's when Henry Kissinger became Secretary of State. Well, so essentially, what I think you have to understand is every agency, whether it's the four-star generals that sit at these major headquarters or the Pentagon or the CIA, they have a part of the picture, but they're missing a part of the picture, and they should have direct involvement. We need some more ping-pong diplomacy, and we need our officials to participate in it.
What about citizens like Jay and I? Should we be going to North Korea? Could we help?
I think any person who is of a good heart and has adventure in their veins can do it. And so if you want to go, fine, I'll help you arrange it. Do I think everybody should go? No, because after we get the first McDonald's there, then things are going to change. So and I like to be part of the advance crew. I like to be one of the early adapters.
You're going back soon?
The next time I'll go back, it will be to see Mount Pektu. Pektu is a cultural phenomenon. It's up by the Chinese border, and according to official mythology in the north, it's where Kim Il-sung was born, which of course is false. He was really born on, I have to tell you this is hilarious. He was born on April 15th, 1912, the same day the Titanic sunk. There's a message for you. Okay. And in the South Korean national anthem, they mention Mount Pektu. So I want to go see that, but the more...
I'll give you a message, Pat. You're an extraordinary guy.
You're just unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. And how you've dedicated your time to this is a wonderful thing. In Yiddish, it's a mitzvah.
Mitzvah.
A mitzvah. You're working for the common good on a very high level. And we are so appreciative that you came down today to talk to us about it.
I thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and I appreciate the chance to say my piece.
Well, if we have 30 seconds left here, Pat, I want to know, do you see North Korea approaching this tipping point? Is it getting ready to something to happen?
You know, these things always happen by surprise. They never happen gradually. They happen suddenly. So I think the possibility is there. Could I predict to the year? No. But I think within our lifetimes, we'll be able to travel to Seoul and take a day trip up to Pyongyang.
Wow.
Oh, I got to go to Brooks Brothers immediately.
Yeah. Get to Brooks Brothers. I'm looking at a picture, ladies and gentlemen, of citizen diplomat Pat Border on the North Korean side of the DMZ, standing next to a North Korean soldier. You can't see this. What kind of exchange did you have with the North Korean soldiers on their side of the border?
Very friendly. In fact, on the northern side of the dividing line, things are much more cheerful and casual than they are in the South. The U.S. Army manages to make things very stilted in the South, and they're official. If you ask them, what's that building for, you usually get a response, I'm sorry, I'm not at liberty to reveal that. But if you go on the northern side, we took a photo of the lieutenant colonel who was in charge of our tour, and they decided as a joke photo to surround him with all the ladies on our tour to make him look like James Bond, and they were the Bond girls, and he was laughing it up. And then when we left, we gave him some more mini bar Chivas Regals and a bottle of Korean wine, and it's very jovial. So the chance for friendship is there, but we have to do a little bit harder searching than we do. We cannot simply say we disapprove of you and therefore we'll ignore you. That wasn't what Nixon and Kissinger did in détente, and if we want to change things, we have to change a little bit. They have to change a lot more than we do, but we need to engage at some low level.
Though there is an opportunity here for other citizen diplomats who feel so inclined, who have the heart and the passion like Patrick Border.
And there are lessons that we can learn from the experience with North Korea that could be applied to other countries in similar circumstance.
Boy, absolutely. Well, Jay Fidell, thank you for serving as co-host for this phenomenal show today. And
thank you for serving as host, David.
And Patrick Border, I just am in a state of absolute shock. And what a warm feeling you have given both Jay and I. What a great feeling.
Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome, and I look forward to being invited back.
Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a safe drive home. We'll see you next week.